What's up, guys? D-Rock1992 here. For this next video, and for my next About Actors series, I'm going to be talking about an actor, a comedian, an actor-comedian in particular that is a favorite of mine, definitely. I've watched a few of his movies. Now, that actor I'm talking about is Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy's has had a long career in Hollywood, but if there is any actor that needs a career resurgence, it's Eddie Murphy. I mean, the 80s and some of the movies in the 90s were good for him, but lately he's fallen down on hard times. You know, he's picked bad movie projects. He's just picked bad movies, which is definitely all actors do it, but in the 90s and 2000s, the majority of his movies have been clunkers. But without further ado, I'm going to talk about Eddie Murphy, because I mean he's one of my favorites. I'm really hoping that he can turn it around within the next couple of years and get back to his old self. And without further ado, I'm actually gonna get started with some television, because Eddie Murphy is known for Saturday Night Live. He was on SNL. Let me see here. Excuse me. Eddie Murphy started out on SNL. I mean, he got his big breakthrough on SNL. 1980 to 1984, he was on Saturday Night Live. And on Saturday Night Live, he had a lot of memorable cameos, or a lot of memorable sketches, I mean. Gumby, I'm Gumby, damn it. Mr. Robinson, a play on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. You haven't checked these out, check them out. They are funny. He's got a great impression of James Brown. James Brown's Hot Tub. Definitely a lot of memorable characters that Eddie Murphy portrayed on SNL. And fact is, in the 80s, SNL was in trouble. Low ratings. Some of the seasons were not very memorable. And he was like, Eddie Murphy probably single-handedly saved the show from cancellation. I mean, it's thanks to him that people still kept watching, even if it was just for him. He was definitely a most valuable player in the 80s. He saved SNL. I mean, the show definitely, it was going to get canceled. Because there were people on that show that weren't being, that weren't critically acclaimed or anything like that. But on comes Eddie Murphy, and this guy who, if you've ever watched Eddie Murphy stand-up before, it's pretty vulgar. Eddie Murphy Raw, I think, is one of his stand-up tours. And that one definitely is pretty raunchy. Pretty raunchy stuff, a lot of swearing in the material and all that, but he's one of the best, there's no doubt about it. He had to definitely clean it up for Saturday Night Live, but what he did definitely was good enough. He's one of the most memorable SNL performers ever. The bad thing about it is that he hasn't really done a lot of comedy, or he hasn't attended a lot of the reunions and stuff like that for SNL since he left SNL. I think he hosted once when he left, but since the 80s, he hasn't appeared on SNL. 1999, they had a 25th anniversary. He wasn't present. I'm really hoping, I'm hoping that he's present for this year, because this year is the 40th anniversary of Saturday Night Live. But I wouldn't bet a lot on him returning, because the history says he won't. He won't come back and remember the show, contribute to the show in some way. Which is a shame, but Saturday Night Live was what put Eddie Murphy on the map. But it put him on the map for his movie career. I mean, he's definitely well known for his movie career. His first movie came in 1982, and it was a popular movie. It's a pretty popular Eddie Murphy film, 48 Hours. And before I go on about the film career, Eddie Murphy's been in a lot of film franchises. A lot of them. There's like 4, I think, that I'm going to be mentioning. So, it's definitely big. He definitely is a pretty funny guy. He's just a funny guy for sure. 48 Hours. Some of his movies came out during his Saturday Night Live days. 48 Hours is one of them. He's a convict, I think, in this movie. Haven't watched it. I'd like to see it, however. About 48 Hours, he has to team up with a police officer. He's a criminal, I think. And the guy, his partner is Nick Nolte, the actor Nick Nolte. And basically, it'll go down in history as one of the best Eddie Murphy performances. And it was also his first. Not a lot, I've said it before, not a lot of great movie stars have had memorable first movies. But Eddie Murphy did. He was riding high on SNL success. And so that allows him to have a very good movie career. And I've said this before as well, a lot of Saturday Night Live performers have gone on to have good movie careers. Just mentioning a few: Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley even, who I might talk about eventually. But 48 Hours was his first movie. In 1983, he comes out with Trading Places, his second movie. He's in this movie with Dan Aykroyd, a former SNL performer. This is where he's a homeless man. Dan Aykroyd's a rich man. And basically they switch places like the Prince and the Pauper, basically. Only modern day Prince and the Pauper, basically. But Trading Places, I've seen parts of it before, but I'd like to see the whole thing. My dad's seen it, and he thinks it's very funny, so I'd like to see it someday. In 1984, though, I think this was probably Eddie Murphy's breakthrough movie role. I mean, 48 Hours and Trading Places were good. Those two movies established him as a good actor, comedic actor. But the movie that really, I think, established him, really was a breakthrough role for him in movies, was Beverly Hills Cop in 1984. This is a franchise, Beverly Hills Cop. The first one I saw a while back, and I like the movie for sure. He stars in this with Judge Reinhold, a popular actor back in the 80s. And this is definitely one of Eddie Murphy's biggest movie performances, is playing Detective Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. A few years later, in 1987, he comes out with Beverly Hills Cop 2, which was as good as Beverly Hills Cop. It's been a while since I've watched those movies, so I'm not really positive on which one I liked better. I don't really remember much of those Beverly Hills Cop movies, but still, I mean, they were pretty memorable. The first two. 1987. Also in 1987, he comes out with what I described to you guys before, Eddie Murphy Raw. Now this one's not for children, that's for sure. Eddie Murphy's done a lot of done a lot of family-friendly type films. This is not family-friendly, to say the least. This is not kid-friendly. This is his second stand-up video. He also had Eddie Murphy Delirious. It's stand-up for sure. I mean, he swears a lot. He does some good impressions. This is Eddie Murphy at his best, really. At his comedic best is Eddie Murphy Raw. A year later, in 1988, he comes out with Coming to America. This is where he is a prince in another country who comes to the United States and experiences a whole lot of adventures. This is actually an early role for Samuel L. Jackson, who's gone on to do like millions of movies. Coming to America, another memorable comedic performance from Eddie Murphy. You talk about who could be one of the best comedians of the 1980s. Eddie Murphy was on that list. He made good movie after good movie. I mean, this guy was good. In 1990, we get into the 1990s, and really, I mean, he had some clunkers in the 90s, but not as much as the next decade, the 2000s, which I will describe after. In 1990, he comes out with a sequel to 48 Hours called Another 48 Hours. I think this was also well received as well. Eddie Murphy reprises his role, Nick Nolte. This movie itself, I actually thought it was good, critically received. It actually wasn't. 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. That definitely is not good. But he's had worse. But 1992, he comes out with a movie called Boomerang. This is an early appearance from Halle Berry, who I probably will talk about. It got mixed reviews from film critics. Let's see here. It's not one of his well-known ones. 45%, which is rotten. Which is definitely rotten, but Boomerang, one of maybe his underrated films. In 1994, Eddie Murphy comes out with Beverly Hills Cop 3, which was definitely not critically received. It is one of the worst movies he's probably ever done. This movie, 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. It probably shouldn't have been done. They probably should have kept it at 2, like the 48 Hours franchise, and that would have been it. But with Beverly Hills Cop 3, and more on the Beverly Hills Cop franchise later. But anyway, in 1996, Eddie Murphy had one of his most memorable roles. And this is a role where, he plays multiple characters. I'm talking about the Nutty Professor. I've watched both of the movies. There's 2 of them in the series. But the first one, he plays most of the family. He plays Professor Sherman Klump / Buddy Love are his 2 main characters. But he plays most of the family. He plays the father, he plays the mother, he plays the grandmother. the reason Eddie Murphy is known for playing multiple roles in movies, and this is because there was an old actor back in the day, Peter Sellers, who Eddie Murphy adored as an actor, and he played a lot of roles. I think there was a movie, Dr. Strangelove, where Peter Sellers played multiple roles, and Eddie Murphy decided, I'm going to be like my idol. I'm going to play multiple roles too, and that it's not, yeah. The Nutty Professor is one of his biggest cases of him playing a lot of roles. But Eddie Murphy could have done the whole film by himself. But, The Nutty Professor, one of the classics of Eddie Murphy's career, for sure. And for those of you who don't know, he's a fat man. He's a very obese man, and he doesn't like it. He doesn't have a lot of confidence. So he wants to get skinny again. And Eddie Murphy's a pretty skinny guy in real life. So he turns into Buddy Love. But unfortunately for him, Buddy Love alter ego, Buddy Love has a mind of his own. He's crude, he's rude, and stuff like that. And it's just a story about that. The Nutty Professor, one of Eddie Murphy's big films. In 1998, he starts to get into voiceover roles. More on that later on. He has a pretty big voiceover role, that he did in 4 animated movies that you'll definitely know when I say. You probably already do know, but in 1998, he played the little dragon Mushu in the Disney animated movie Mulan. It's where Mulan joins the Imperial Army, the Chinese Imperial Army against the Huns. And she's a woman, and that's outlawed. It's outlawed that no women can join the army and all that. And she joins the army, and it's a story about that. Also in 1998, Eddie Murphy comes out with the first Dr. Dolittle movie. This is a film franchise as well. This basically is about a man who can talk to animals. Dr. Dolittle's one of his more family-friendly films as well. And he's found success. I think more box office success with Dr. Dolittle, but Eddie Murphy's just found more success lately with animated roles or kid-friendly roles instead of his more raunchier roles. In 1999, Eddie Murphy comes out with a couple movies there. Life is one of them. Maybe one of his more underrated films, but Martin Lawrence is in the film as well. And it did okay, 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not one that's the most memorable. This one might be, though. 1999, he's in Bowfinger, the movie. The movie's Bowfinger. It has Heather Graham, Steve Martin, and Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy plays 2 roles in this one. He's an actor. Steve Martin's character, Eddie Murphy's... I'll talk about it more when I talk about Steve Martin, but Bowfinger is... I'll talk about it now, but Bowfinger, in one area, he plays brothers. He plays Kit Ramsey and then Jiff Ramsey. Kit Ramsey's a big shot Hollywood actor who Steve Martin's character is trying to get to put into his movie without Kit's knowledge. And his double is Jiff Ramsey, who's a clumsy individual. He's nothing like his brother. But definitely check out Bowfinger. It's a good movie. Now we get into the 2000s. And there's going to be a lot of clunkers that I talk about that Eddie Murphy's been in. Nutty Professor 2, The Klumps, started out the 2000s for Eddie Murphy. The sequel to Nutty Professor. And this one definitely, I don't think, it probably didn't do as well as the first movie. Let's see here. The Nutty Professor got a 65%, which is above average, which is a little above average. You know, it's favorable. But 65% on Rotten Tomatoes. Nutty Professor 2, The Klumps. As for that movie, it got 26%. So, for critics, that probably was another movie. That probably was a sequel that didn't need to get made. But Nutty Professor 2, The Klumps, he stopped after that, after the second movie. But another one in that franchise. In 2001, he continues with a franchise and starts up his own little franchise. Actually, not really his own franchise. He plays a supporting role. Now, in 2001, the film series that I'm going to talk about, everybody pretty much knows, Shrek. And Eddie Murphy plays the donkey, who is just, I mean, he's manic, he's hilarious. You know, only Eddie Murphy could play the donkey, really. In Shrek, this is a role that Eddie Murphy was born to do. The first Shrek got great critical reviews. Donkey is Shrek's best friend, eventually annoying best friend. But, it's it's one of the better animated movies of the millennium, basically, of this new millennium. I mean, and Eddie Murphy's donkey definitely helps, that's for sure. Dr. Dolittle 2, Eddie Murphy also came out with that in 2001, and Dr. Dolittle 2, I think the Dr. Dolittle movies in general have not been as critically acclaimed as the other kid-friendly movies that Eddie Murphy's done, but still, it's pretty, but still, I mean, I think they've made some money at the box office. Next movie that I'm going to talk about, though, did not make much at the box office. In fact, this movie is considered as one of the worst money makers ever in film history. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, which came out in 2002. It is one of the worst box office bombs. Its budget was $100 million. $100 million! But it only made up $7,103,973 at the box office. So it is one of the worst ones. For sure, I mean, this is just epically bad. And this really kind of jump-started his bad movie output in the 2000s. 5% on Rotten Tomatoes, that's not good either. Excuse me. Also in 2002, he comes out with I Spy. This is an underrated one he does with Owen Wilson. And this one definitely... Let's see here. Well, it got negative reviews. If you've never heard of I Spy, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't. It's one of those it's based on a TV series back in the day, but the movie version just did not do very well at all. 2002 was not a memorable year for Eddie Murphy. 2003 comes about, and he does a couple movies in that year. Daddy Daycare is one of those movies. It is actually a franchise, but the sequel of that movie, Daddy Day Camp, Eddie Murphy actually doesn't appear in. So I'm thinking maybe the decision from Eddie Murphy was he's not going to be in a second movie that's a crapper, basically. But Daddy Daycare is basically two daddies. They undergo daycare. They start their own daycare, and it's pretty chaotic. It's one of those kid-friendly movies from Eddie Murphy, and it does 28% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is definitely probably more geared for kids, more so than adults. But still, I mean, another bad movie for Eddie Murphy in the 2000s. It just, it's just not good for Eddie Murphy in the 2000s. It's just, in 2003, he also comes out with The Haunted Mansion. This is another family movie that he did. I watched it a long time ago, but it actually did not do very well at the box office either. I mean, or at the box office it did pretty well, but critically, again, another bad Eddie Murphy performance. In 2004, the sequel to Shrek comes out, Shrek 2. He plays the donkey again, and it's a memorable role. One of the few successes that Eddie Murphy had in the 2000s came in 2006, and he was actually nominated for an Academy Award for this movie for Best Supporting Actor, talking about the movie Dreamgirls. And I think in this movie he plays a... let me see. He's a singer. He's a performer in this movie, and Dreamgirls. Dreamgirls got nominated for an Academy Award for this movie. His only Academy Award nomination, but Dreamgirls a memorable role for him. 2007, he comes out with probably what critics think is one of the worst comedies of all time, Norbit. This is another Eddie Murphy movie where he plays multiple roles. He plays the title character, he plays the fat wife of Norbit, he plays a guy named Mr. Wong. Pretty silly and ridiculous, but again, another Eddie Murphy movie that was critically well received, but that was box office wise, it was good. But 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, just not good. I mean, that's the curse of Eddie Murphy. He's been in some bad movies in the 2000s that were not critically received. And he's been in movies that have not been box office received either. But also in 2007, he comes out with Shrek the Third. Now, Shrek the Third was not as well received as the first two Shrek movies. But Shrek the Third, nonetheless, continues a franchise for Eddie Murphy. In 2008, he comes out with Meet Dave. He plays a couple of roles in this movie, and yet again, this is another movie that it lost money at the box office, and critically, I mean, 19%. It's just not good for Eddie Murphy. I mean, 2010, he comes out with the final Shrek movie in the series, Shrek Forever After. And this movie was not as critically well received as the other Shrek movies, but it might even be the lowest critically received movie in the whole series. But Shrek Forever After, puts a close to the Shrek series and Eddie Murphy's role as the donkey. In 2011, Eddie Murphy comes out with Tower Heist. Now, a lot of critics and a lot of people have said this is a return to Eddie Murphy's 80s glory. Tower Heist is that type of movie, and I talked about it with Ben Stiller, but he plays a criminal who helps out Ben Stiller's gang infiltrate the hotel where they steal money from Alan Alda, and Alan Alda's character, and he's a character who helps in the Tower Heist. That's all I'm really going to say about that. The next year, in 2012, he came out with a movie called 1,000 Words. If you've never heard of that movie before, I'm not surprised because it got a dubious 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And thus far, that's the last movie that Eddie Murphy's done. There's a couple movies on the horizon, though, which I'll talk about, but 1,000 Words in 2012 has been his last film role thus far. To say that Eddie Murphy has gone through a bad lull, a bad slumping period movie-wise, is an understatement. This guy, he just has not been able to find those big-time, prominent roles that he found in the 80s. And, I really hope that he comes back and is that dynamic actor again, because I really like Eddie Murphy. He's a funny guy. He should go out on tour again and have another comedy tour. That's what I think. Like the Eddie Murphy Raw and the Delirious comedy tours he did in the 80s. Now, I did say there were a couple other movies on the horizon coming out for Eddie Murphy. He's going to be doing this movie with Halle Berry. It's not on the Wikipedia filmography, but it is on his kind of biography here. Miles and Me is the movie, and he's going to star in it with Halle Berry. It's a reunion for them. They starred in that movie Boomerang together. But later on this year, it's supposed to begin pre-production. But that's one of the movies. And the other movie that Eddie Murphy's coming out with is yet another sequel movie. And he's going to come out with Beverly Hills Cop 4. The reason he wants to do that, and it's coming out in 2016, the date for it, I don't know. Let me see if they have a date of release yet. March of 2016. So it's going to be a while until this movie comes, but Eddie Murphy wants to do Beverly Hills Cop 4 because he knew, and pretty much everybody in America knew, that Beverly Hills Cop 3 was a total bust. And Eddie Murphy wants to end the series on a good note. He doesn't want to end the series with Beverly Hills Cop 3, so he's looking to go with Beverly Hills Cop 4. And you can look for that in 2016, while away, but I'm kind of curious about it. I'm curious about it myself. But that's pretty much it for Eddie Murphy's career. He's been a great comedian he's slumped in movies for the longest time now. But back in his glory days, there was no stopping him. He was so good at what he did. He's still a top comedian for me. And I haven't watched much of his bad movies, but I probably would laugh really hard for those movies, you know? I like dumb comedy and things like that, and Eddie Murphy does that a little bit, and I really hope in the future he has better movies come out, and he has better success with those movies, because I really like him. He's a great, great actor. And that's it. D-Rock 1992 out.